Hey there, miners. I'm here to talk to you about something a little different today. Wait, I say that like every time, don't I? Well, I still mean it. Anyway, the topic is grenades, and their various uses. We got 4 new ones, and I've never really talked about them in depth, so I figured now would be a good time to dig into each of these pieces of ordnance that we have at our disposal, old and new. I'll be covering general stats, use cases, and limitations so you can make more informed choices on which to bring, when, and why. Let's get cooking. Oh my god, I cannot believe I just said that. Let's just go. So, grenades. I'm going to be grouping these by class, starting with the gunner's sticky grenade, one of the simpler throwables at our disposal. Dealing a solid 130 damage and sticking to targets, this grenade does everything you could hope and expect one to do. But there is one less obvious use for this one as well. Anytime this grenade sticks to a target, it has a 130% chance to fear the unlucky bug, usually causing it to turn and run, ideally in the opposite direction of you, and if you're lucky, into a group of its own kind. The ensuing explosion also causes a 100% fear effect near the blast as well. Just like any other fear source, the target turning to run can open it up to weak point damage. This is especially the case with Praetorians. But this fear effect can also cause a much needed moment of breathing room amidst an approaching swarm, if you manage to stick it to an especially dangerous foe, or at least get it right in the center of the group. Keep this in mind and use your sticky grenades wisely, namely for dispersing and killing groups of grunt-type glyphids rather than spamming larger, more explosive-resistant enemies like oppressors, Praetorians, and bolts, although it can work in a pinch if you need it to. It can also be very useful for dealing damage to the Hive Guard during its venting crystal's damage phase. Just a thought. Otherwise, not too much else to cover here. They get the job done and are rarely a bad choice, so unless you're dealing with a lot of Nectera or something, go for it. Next up, we have the Incendiary grenade, an often misunderstood throwable with some great potential. It doesn't explode on contact with the surface, instead covering the ground in a fast igniting combustible fluid that acts as a persistent damage and heat source in a 3.5 meter diameter area for 6 seconds. No, the rumors that these things are just full of lighter fluid are not true, or at least haven't been officially backed up anyway. It's a proprietary mixture. I'm not really at liberty to explain it. And no, you can't drink it and spit it out to make cool flame cones. Stop asking. Isn't this a gunner grenade? I would expect that from drillers, okay? Not you guys. Let's just move on. This sounds great on paper, but in practice it can appear a bit underwhelming, with the bugs often making it out of the flames on fire and still very much alive and ready to attack you all the same. Often what happens is that the bugs will begin to notice the burning ground isn't a good place to be, so they will walk along the walls and ceiling to reach you. They aren't zombies, so they will avoid damage if at all possible after some initial confusion. While this does have some use in lengthening the travel time to you and possibly killing a number of enemies, it's not ideal as far as immediate killing power goes. These grenades are best suited to close quarters and choke points where the heat and tick damage is unavoidable. I do have a few things to add here though. Uses that are a bit situational but nevertheless interesting. The first is their use as a passive killer while you're inside your shield. A shield generator will always recharge your personal shield faster than the incendiary can damage you, so you can actually stand inside one while the ground around you burns, killing anything outside stupid enough to stand around while you revive a teammate or resupply. This is especially true for smaller sized shields. Larger ones may cover the entire burning surface of the grenade, so be aware that you might not want to throw it right in the center if you have one of those equipped. Another use that I often bring these grenades for is when I'm using the volatile bullets overclock from my Bulldog pistol. Anything directly hit with an incendiary is ignited instantly, allowing you a perfect target for the insane damage boost at a moment's notice. While the gunner has other options for igniting targets, this is by far the quickest at medium range, which can be a lifesaver for when you need to kill something approaching you like a bulk detonator. The other use I'd advise these for is in the presence of rivals. The incendiary grenade's fire is the same as the driller's sticky flames in that it is not only igniting targets, but keeping their heat high for the full duration that something stands in them. This means that rivals that meander into the flames will be very easy to ignite, especially the rival nemesis, which can be kited into tight spaces in order to get the full effect. At very least, it can keep them from cooling off before you reload your weapon. You can also use these to quickly dispatch swarmers if you toss them right into the center of a group. making it a low self-damage way to save yourself from a skittering horde. Normally I bring these if my secondary relies on igniting enemies quickly, regardless of the mission type. Otherwise, just be smart about when you choose these and try to have them in missions where you'll be seeing lots of tight tunnels and choke points rather than large open rooms. Next is the cluster grenade. These bundled explosives have gained a reputation among miners as often mishandled, which makes them all the better depending on who you ask. They boast a combined payload of 360 damage divided among 9 bomblets that are released from the initial thrown cluster, all of which have a 50% chance to stun anything caught in the explosion. These things pack a huge punch and can wipe out whole groups of bugs if thrown in such a way that they detonate just over them, maximizing the bomblet spread. They can also annoy the hell out of your teammates if you toss them out in a panic, especially in an enclosed space. Just because you have explosives resistance doesn't mean they do. Unless of course they chose the correct class, that is. But hey, if you need to, go right ahead. You can be the one to decide if it was worth explaining why that was necessary to them afterwards, when the bugs are dead. I ain't judging. Besides being a blast to use and possibly the most satisfying grenade when thrown just at the right time, these grenades do have their specific uses as well. The most general use is to simply stun things in a chaotic situation. Your explosion resistance as gunner will allow you to use these things to save yourself from taking more damage if you're in a desperate situation or cornered in a fight. They can also be used to deal great damage to Praetorians and other big bugs if you manage to toss one right underneath their carapace, also an area known as the sternum. The bombs will be released and hopefully all explode on contact with the ground and the bug, causing all 360 damage to be dealt at once. About the equivalent of spamming 3 sticky grenades. An easy way to make this happen more consistently is to power attack a hole in the ground in front of the beast's path and to toss your grenade in there, ensuring it's more likely that they detonate in a specific spot. It's not perfect, but it can help you control its detonation better, unless you want to get good with bouncing them or using the geometry around you to your advantage instead. It's just a little extra thing I've kind of picked up. Another thing you can do is use them to clear the area around a shield that you just dropped down. After the shield is up and you're inside, toss a cluster above your head, or slightly off to the side, either way. The bombs will disperse in such a way that they will land all around the edges of the shield, efficiently killing and softening most anything that is waiting for you outside without you having to fire, allowing you to multitask as you resupply, revive, or try to relight your cigar for the 4th goddamn time. I tend to like taking clusters if the build I'm currently using is lacking some AoE or stun capability. They can really round out firepower heavy builds with some much needed controlled chaos. Plus, look how satisfying that is. Damn. And finally for Gunner, the newest addition, the Tactical Lead Bursters. A contender for the title of Friendly Fire Grenade, a reputation it built fairly quickly for itself before R&D made some tweaks to the ammunition. The lead bursters consist of what is essentially a magazine fitted to a firing mechanism in the form of a sprinkler, spraying 3 bursts of bullets in a radial pattern in all directions, within a half sphere-shaped area. The ammunition is lower caliber, so to make up for it there is a lot of it. I mean, hell, what were we supposed to do with all the surplus Sabata ammunition we had sitting around the rig? The grenade's base is a spike capable of sticking to any surface, which makes it very versatile for placement options. What it lacks in finesse, it makes up for in raw damage, outputting enough shots to heavily suppress any group of lightly armored enemies with little to no issue. That also includes you and your teammates, by the way. It does have some damage fall off with distance, so try to keep it relatively close to the intended recipients of your little gift. Again, that's not supposed to be your teammates, or yourself. I cannot stress this enough. How do you use it though? I mean, it's a hail of bullets fired in the absolute least safe way possible. But how can you turn this safety hazard into an opportunity? One way I've been using these is to simply clear and soften rooms that you've just entered or exited with known threats looming in them. Toss it into a newly opened dirt wall, into a pit from high above, out into an open area with lots of flying enemies, and even just outside your shield while you're reloading. All great choices. Its biggest advantage over cluster grenades is that it has a wide effect that triggers on contact with the ground, not after a set timer. This means it can be used at a distance or without a significant delay if thrown correctly. I find it to be particularly good at clearing enemies like grunts, given that they are large enough to catch more than one shot, but also weak enough to die from them. Small enemies die instantly to shots, but have a higher chance of being missed by the bullets. But if you're surrounded, it can't hurt to try. Large armored enemies will tank hits relatively well if hit from a distance, but we will get to that in a second. Bursters also have a great general utility against flying enemies as opposed to Gunner's other grenades that may be a bit hard to leverage against flying threats. If thrown on the ground, the spray will strike Mactera right in the weak points. It's also fantastic for larger enemies, but only if you can get one underneath them, not at a distance. Sort of similar to how I described how you should use clusters against them earlier. By nature of having a sphere-shaped spray pattern and high damage near the epicenter, a well-placed lead burster under a Praetorian or a bulk detonator can do an amazing amount of damage. If you're confident you can land them, it can be a quick and dirty way to dispose of a large approaching threat. This goes for shellbacks when they aren't rolling, breeders, spitballers, pretty much anything big enough to eat multiple shots without heavy armor. I mean, just look at this. Look at this. Just make sure you don't throw them as a panic button in the middle of a swarm, especially in close quarters, because I can assure you that catching a blow with your teeth is not as cool sounding as you think it is. As far as use cases go, they're pretty general purpose since you can encounter good moments to use them throughout many missions, but I will say that they come in pretty handy during Mactera Plague warnings. They can also be great if you're the type of gunner who forgets to use their grenades pretty frequently. Many times you use them, you can warrant throwing out 2 or 3 at the same time to delete something, so consider that if you only remember that you have grenades like once or twice a mission. You can get more value out of it that way. Oh, and one more thing with everything that's going on, do consider bringing them for rockpox-ridden caves, because the kinetic damage they can dish out can come in really handy. With the right angle, they can make short work of those blisters growing on the wildlife. And this is where I would move on to Driller's arsenal of throwables, but I realized halfway through this that the other classes will probably end up being their own videos now. I talk too much. Anyways, I hope I've helped inspire you to use varying types of explosives from mission to mission. If you have a favorite, then by all means, go ahead and use it, but the right tool for the right job, you know how it goes. I'll be covering Driller next time, just as soon as we get squared away with what's coming. We've been hearing some concerning reports of the developing situation down on Hoxie's. Just what we needed, huh? Well, get down there and toss some bombs. Don't worry, I didn't forget. A potassium chloride-ridden thank you to my patrons. Avertic Talo, Axis Kronos, Kyoto Sasukyo, The Flannel Man, Flagoblast, Agent Maxwell, Infraray, Calwee21, Lee Trot, Loot Bugs, Autogyro, Raging Ripto, Sergeant Rattlebones, Steamstuck Dragon, That Guy, Cole Bestien, Codex, Cabriel PBC, Theodore Argesh, Thomas Redmayne, and Von Boomslang. Whew, that last one's hard to say. I don't know why that last one's so hard to say. Until next time, rock and stone.
I own a M1000 for drop pot defense, since that's what the Greybeards of old intended. 4 ruffian leaf lovers break into my drop pod. I grab my beer and my M1000, blow a barrel-sized hole in the chest of the first one. He's dead on the spot. Draw my Zhukovs at the second one. They miss entirely because I forgot the accuracy mod and nailed the neighboring driller. I have to resort to the boomstick at the top of my ramp, tweaked with the double barrel overclock. Rock and stone, lads! The double barrel shreds the knife ears in the blast. The sound of the extra pellets set off the space rig alarms. Fix pickaxe and charge the last terrified leaf lover. He bleeds out waiting for the medbay bots to arrive because pickaxe power attack wounds are impossible to stitch up. Just as the Greybeards of old intended.